Charlotte, if you want to come over here. And then it looks like all of your microphones are on. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tenement Museum. My name is Kat Lloyd. I'm the Director of Programs here at the museum. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you here tonight for our January Tenement Talk, Kitchen Liberation, Home Cooking, and Women's Rights, together in partnership with the League of Kitchens. So just to get a sense, how many of you have come on a tour at the Tenement Museum before? Just raise your hand. Wonderful. And for those of you who have not, we hope that you will join us for a tour in one of our two tenement buildings. This building, 103 Orchard Street and 97 Orchard Street, which together were home to about 10,000 people over the course of 150 years. Most of those people were immigrants, migrants, or refugees, and many of those people were immigrant women, migrants, and refugees. So every day on our tours, we talk about women, about cooking, about feminism. And so this conversation tonight is really an extension of what we do every day on our tours. So I wanted to highlight briefly a story of a woman who inspires us here at the Tenement Museum every day, who I think would be here in the audience if she were still around in 2020. Her name is Caroline Schneider. And together with her husband, John, she ran a German saloon in the basement of 97 Orchard Street, just 4 doors down from where we are now. This business was open from 1864 to 1886. And together, Caroline and John Schneider served the German-American community here on the Lower East Side, which at that point was known as Klein Deutschland, or Little Germany. It was the first non-English-speaking neighborhood in the United States. So Caroline, we don't know a lot about her life directly, of course. We never got to meet her, but we do know that she was the cook behind the saloon business. So, this time of day, around 6:30 on a Thursday, people are wrapping up their work weeks. We can imagine the saloon filling up with customers, right? The smell of coal smoke from the stove, people warming their hands, the sound of the house band, and the smell of sausages, of sauerkraut coming from the kitchen behind the saloon. Now, that kitchen behind Caroline's saloon is also her home kitchen. Caroline and her husband, John, who are both immigrants from parts of Germany, they live directly behind their business. So Caroline is essentially a home cook and a part business owner. We don't know if she ever got recognition for the work that she did, helping her husband with the business. But the better part of her days were spent negotiating with vendors at the Essex Market a block away, cooking in her small kitchen over a coal stove, the dishes that were familiar to her from Prussia, her home state in Germany. And, carrying those dishes through to the neighbors, the customers, some of whom might have also been German American, some of whom might have been unfamiliar with German cooking. And this is where I really think that Caroline's story connects to our conversation here tonight. Caroline is making foods that today, no question, we would see as American foods. Pretzels, frankfurters, hot dogs, hamburgers, things that in the 1870s, 1880s would have been seen as perhaps un-American by some. And Caroline Schneider and her work in her family's business might be introducing people to German cuisine for the first time. Now, Caroline, she's an immigrant woman, a mother, a cook, and a businesswoman. And we understand Caroline to really be connected to the stories that we are here to talk about tonight. Our conversation this evening will explore the business of home cooking as developed by the women of the League of Kitchens, a dream team of immigrant cooks who teach in their homes. How many of you have taken a League of Kitchens class? A few of you. Wonderful. tonight we will have some information available as well as some discount codes for you to experience a League of Kitchens cooking class for yourself. But we are thrilled to be joined tonight by two women from the League of Kitchens, the founder and CEO, Lisa Gross, and the instructor and women's rights activist, Mab Abbasgholizadeh. Guiding our conversation tonight is Charlotte Druckman, journalist and editor of the recently released compendium, Women on Food. So it is now my pleasure to turn it over to Charlotte to kick off our conversation, and we will make sure to leave time for some questions from the audience. We really hope for this to be a full conversation with all of us.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you to this wonderful museum that I love very much as a native New Yorker for hosting this panel. And thank you to Lisa and League of Kitchens for asking me to moderate it. I'm very proud.
Thank you for moderating.
I wanted to start by asking you, this is a very general, open-ended question, but how you define home cooking. You can be clinical about it, you can be personal about it, but how, when you think of home cooking, what exactly is it you're thinking of?
To me, home cooking is not restaurant cooking, and it's cooking that has been learned in a domestic space and that is performed in a domestic space, and is usually learned from family members.
Mab?
For me, home cooking is thinking about my mom, my home, my country, and connection with nature, with ingredients, green things, and meditation, and healing by thinking about nice memories through of cooking.
I love that description.
I love them both. They're both like perfect answers. And
Mine was very immigrant.
we'll discuss what that means. Yeah. So, okay, moving from there, and Lisa, I'm going to ask you this first just because you started League of Kitchens, but so this idea of home cooking as a business, as an entrepreneur, how did that idea click for you? Because it tends to not be considered something that would be an entrepreneurial for-profit thing.
Yeah. So maybe I'll also just say what the League of Kitchens is.
Yes.
Since some people here might not know. So the League of Kitchens is a unique cooking school in New York City where all of our instructors are immigrant women like Mab, who are amazing, exceptional home cooks. And they all teach small cooking classes in their own home kitchens. So students sign up on our website, and then you go to Mab's apartment or to the apartments of all of our other instructors, and you spend an afternoon with them, eating together, cooking together, eating together. All our workshops start with eating, with a prepared homemade lunch. You cook, and then you eat again. And you're learning someone's family recipes, and you're learning their personal story and the way that their family recipes intersect with their personal story and their culture and their history. And so I started this company in February. It'll be 6 years ago. And the idea and the need and the desire for this came out of my own experience in that my mom is Korean. She immigrated to the U.S. in the early 1970s. My father is American of Hungarian Jewish descent, and his family came to New York City on one side in the 1890s and the other side in the 1920s, so two very different immigrant stories. And when I was growing up, my Korean grandmother lived with my family and cooked all of this amazing Korean food all the time. But whenever I would go into the kitchen and want to help her, sometimes she'd let me help a little bit, but usually she said, "Don't worry about cooking, you should go study, because studying is more important." And, I really appreciate where that feeling and sentiment came from, and that she really wanted me to have educational and professional opportunities that she didn't have and desperately wanted, really, really wanted to have in her own life. But that also meant that she didn't value her own cooking skills and didn't value what she knew and what she had to share because her culture didn't value it. And so I never learned to cook from her, and neither did my mother for the same reason. She's the youngest of 6 children, so her 2 oldest sisters learned everything, and my grandmother said to her too, like, oh, you're the youngest, do whatever you want, you don't have to worry about this. So I never learned from her. And then fast forward, after college, I was really starting to cook on my own for the first time, and I really fell in love with cooking. And I wanted to cook Korean food, cook these dishes from my childhood, and my grandmother had passed away by that time. I couldn't learn from my mother because my mother kind of hates cooking and is not a very good cook, which is something else to talk about. But I tried to teach myself from cookbooks and from the internet, and just nothing tasted as good as when my grandmother made it. There was always something missing. And so I had this fantasy of, oh, I wish there was another Korean grandmother that I could cook with and learn her family recipes and cook with her in her home kitchen. And I kind of stored that idea away, and then fast forward, I did a lot of different things, and I ended up doing an MFA in participatory public art, and I was doing a lot of art projects involving food and the intersection of food and culture and all these things. And I came back to New York, thought about, okay, what do I want to do next? And this idea came back to me, and I thought, well, what if instead of just finding a Korean grandmother, I could find grandmothers from all over the world in New York City and create some sort of opportunity for people to cook with them and learn their family recipes. And then this idea started to develop more. I thought, well, what if it wasn't just about the cooking, but it was really this opportunity for meaningful cross-cultural learning and connection? Because even though New York City is the most diverse city on the planet right now, statistically, there are very few opportunities for meaningful cross-cultural interaction. Most interactions are service-based. It's like the waiter at the restaurant, the person at the dry cleaner, the clerk at the bodega. And so this idea developed into something much larger, which was a way for people to really connect across difference and connect across difference using food and cooking. And so I thought I would start it as a 3-month project, realized I could start it as a business, and I started it as a business.
Did you get any pushback, or was it, what were the challenges of taking this idea that, again, I think because people tend to not value home cooking, and we can also talk about things like ageism, and it's like you have women who are of an older age cooking in their house, and that this could be a business. What were the challenges, or maybe it was just, everyone welcomed it?
Yeah, well, when I was starting to develop this idea and talk to people about it, one question some people asked me was, how are you going to stop this from being a kind of voyeurism or poverty tourism? And so, I actually did this small pilot. I found 2 women who actually are still our instructors, kind of created workshops with them, figured out a training, figured out what this was actually like, because it was good in my head, but I didn't know what it would actually feel like. And just everybody loved it, and the instructors loved it. And I actually took classes at all the cooking schools in New York City so I could learn what I thought people were doing well and not well. And I realized a few things. One, with the right instructors, you just feel so privileged being in their home and learning from them and cooking with them. And they're like the queens of their domain and so comfortable and confident, and there's no sense of like voyeurism. It's like, no, you feel so lucky to be there. And I think also, I made a decision early on to make this basically a small business and instead of a nonprofit. And so one decision I made also was, okay, these workshops by nature have to be really intimate. 6 people is our max because you're in small New York City apartments. And okay, to make this work economically, I was like, oh, I have to price these the same as the French Culinary Institute. Yeah. And actually that became super important, because what we're also saying is spending an afternoon with Mab is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than spending an afternoon cooking with some French chef at the French Culinary Institute. And if you want to learn about Persian cooking, you're not going to find a better person than Mab, who's been cooking all her life and learned from her mother and grandmother. And with so many cuisines around the world, this idea of restaurant cooking as like the apotheosis of a cuisine, that's really a 19th century French invention.
And I was about to say, and restaurant cooking is the de facto is French or European in the style of French, in the hierarchy of it.
Yeah.
Mab, I wanted to ask you, based on that, what your thoughts are on this intersection of something that's both commercial and personal, and what it means to you to have people in your home, but also to be paid to to teach them your food, and maybe you can tie that into how you became part of League of Kitchens.
Okay, this is three different questions.
Yeah.
About it's, I think, not me, just also other instructors. The first thing they think when Lisa come and say, okay, work with us, it's not the business. It's the first thing, it's not the business. It's more about expressing with themselves, connection with other people, and being and contributing something for new country. It's, I think, because it was my observation with other instructors as well, that maybe because I am feminist, this is my thought, but this is not just my first motivation. I think other instructors' motivation also same me. It's really important when you come to a new country, what you can contribute. And I am a filmmaker, I am a feminist, I am a writer, I am journalist, I am all about like a modern feminist professional digital-based things, like a web designer, all of this. But when you come to a new country like New York, there is lots of new energy and lots of competition and lots of diversity. And then that is, for me, it was by my intuition. I think there is a story about that two mouse and that two human. There is a very famous, what is it?
I think, right? But I can't remember.
Who moved my cheese?
Yeah.
Who moved my cheese? It's more about it's about the more intuitive things that you come to a new country and by intuition, you think that what I can contribute, because I am a middle-aged, I am in color, I am, the base thing is the language for, like in feminist world, if I want to work internationally or nationally. So there is lots of intersectional issues. It's not privilege, it's issues. Like you lose lots of privilege and you face lots of issues. And why I am here, I think I am here because of my freedom. I am here, and what I can do to be free and keep this freedom. Is it good as an opposition feminist? I am opposition feminist. I am anti-regime of Iran, and I am exiled because of my activism. Is it good I work with some regime change agency against Iran, or this is kind of the not independent job? For me, it was an independent job. For me, I had like very complicated situation, and also the main things for me was my intuition to seek my freedom. And for this, if I wanted to go to work with regime change agency for supporting them and using women's rights issue as iconic things for changing regime in Iran, it wasn't me, because it wasn't real. I like to change my country, but I don't like to be agent of other groups. So also in this country, I can't do the same professional things that I used to do in my country, like filmmaking. I do that as an independent, but as a professional job, there is lots of what is? Yes, yes.
Obstacles, I said.
Obstacles, yeah. And so for these things helped me to just follow my intuition and just start cooking. In the beginning, I never thought that I can make money with cooking, and I didn't know that I can make a business with that, or I do business with that. But there is a long story how it's happened. But the part that I find Lisa, it was one of my friends said, "You are immigrant, and they have a network for immigrant instructor. Why you don't go and apply?" I was just in the beginning very curious. I was curious, and in the beginning, I just wanted to know. It was my intuition, really. It wasn't my decision. Then what? This is, I think, it's almost 1 year I am working with League of Kitchen, and I feel every other day that it's feeling more family, more connection with the old teams and with Lisa. And for me, it is very, it's a space for expressing and doing my contribution. And then, yeah. As an activist, I am very idealist. First contribution and then business. Maybe this is our mistake in Iran.
I was thinking about Lisa, your grandmother, and how in Korea for her, being cooking and was not something that she thought you should do because she didn't think it was respectable. And to go back to this idea of sort of the stereotypes about home cooking, something I'm really interested in, and I think you guys will both have different perspectives on this, is that just an American phenomenon? Are there other parts of the world where home cooking is seen really differently? Because I think that there are. And I wonder if it's something that you guys have observed, even Mab, in terms of, in Iran, how people think of home cooking, if there's more respect for it, if there's more respect for women for doing it, or if it's the same problem. I just wonder if there's a difference. Because I think if we go back very far in time, and sometimes not even that far, you realize that feeding your family used to be something that was done by both men and women together, even if it was men, farming the land and then women cooking the food. But it was a collective job. And here in industrialized United States, it ended up falling into sort of housework, women's work. But I just wonder if maybe that's different in other parts of the world, and if you've maybe noticed that from working with women from other parts of the world. And Mab, just your own observation or comparison to Iran.
Well, first of all, I would say that patriarchy, as we all know, is not limited to the United States. So Korea is traditionally a very patriarchal and hierarchical culture. And I think, in our emails, we were talking a little bit about, is home cooking denigrated because it's a women's thing, or are women not valued for it because it's women? What's the connection? And my theory is that because home cooking has been a women's realm, like other things that are traditionally women's roles, like caregiving, all kinds of caregiving roles in the family, outside of the home, like nursing or teaching or childcare, those are all underpaid and devalued because they are traditionally associated with women. But one of the things that has become really clear to me, actually, even just in the last year, is that our instructors are culinary and cultural lineage holders in their communities, and that the way culinary knowledge has been passed down in humanity over the last 10,000 years is primarily as a women's tradition in the home, an oral tradition between generations of women. And that is why it's unseen and unvalued. And so one of the things that I feel so excited about in terms of the League of Kitchens and the work we're doing is making that, not only that labor visible, but that knowledge and expertise visible, and that this is a very, very worthy, important cultural contribution, this knowledge and expertise that's passed down between women.
I think someone said this recently, and I think it was such a great way to put it. It's that, what is the difference between work and labor, and why do we deem some things work and other things labor? And I think it's about redefining, what labor is, and recognizing that cooking at home is actually part of that. But Mab, I'm wondering your thoughts.
For me, it's a little bit complicated because not only in my country we think, in my generation we think that this is not, it is very boring to work in kitchen and make for hours and hours food and just finish it by 5 minutes. You can do better things. You can be doctor, you can be engineer, it's kind of perfectionism, combination of perfectionism with some, like a very, I think capitalist values that this, and also about it's really about the feminism and about how we define what is the valuable and what is the perfect job. What is the perfect? In my generation in Iran, I didn't want to be like my mother, traditional woman, working in kitchen all the time and doing nothing for outside of in society. And my dad and all of men in my community, they had right to do everything outside because they were outside. They were not inside of home, and they were not inside of kitchen. Even I heard several times that we have a guest or we have a party, and this is job of women. They gather in kitchen and talk, and men, they sit in living room and talk about news and important things. And women, they just make food and talk about their kids. For me, it was why. What is the valuable? From the beginning, it was in all of my mentality and all of my character mixed with cooking, it's wasting time. It was my value to be outside and be social person and just do things that society say that is perfect. For me, it took time. After, I never had imagination when I was in Iran that I can be in my home with 6 students and talk about the culture and cook together and learn from one by one of these people every week. And, or I just go to the big kitchen in my other job and just do meditation and decide to do. One day I said, why? Why you do that? In the beginning, I had big fight between Mab Cook and between Mab Abbasgholizadeh, feminist women's rights activist. I had always fight. And always my discussion was, what, Mab Cook, tell me, why you want to do that? Why you don't go to other job? And Mab Cook used this language. Do you care about agency? Yes, I care. I have agency. I can do everything with this. Are you care about creation or being creative? Yes, I care. Okay, I am creative. Do you want to be empowered and be independent from all of this empowered agent? Yes, I do. Okay. So when I cook, when I use my talent, my memory, my creation, all of my feminine things, other things comes up. What? All of my gene and my connection with my grandma, my grandgrandma, and all women in my history. They start talking in my head, okay, use this. And always I write my memories also. That's a very interesting connection with my past, with all of women in my side, because in my feminist experience was, what is the meaning that we I have a relation in my feminism with my grandma. What is this? It is just very like a romantic theory. But by cooking, I find that this is not romantic. This is true. Because we can transfer by our gene all of our feeling in kitchen. Why many women, why they want to find a safe zone, they go to kitchen and they cook? Because this comes from our grandma. It is the space that, now I say that, it is, I don't know I am radical in this or not, but I think that kitchen is the very safest space for women to empower themselves, to be with themselves, and heal themselves. So why not? Why, as a feminist, I think this is bad. So, but still I have problem with my family inside of Iran. If I tell them that, for example, to my mom, I said, Mom, do you know what I am doing here? She said, I don't know, but I just know that you paid lots of price to leave this country, because I can't see my family, I can't come back because of my political activism. And I said, I am enjoying cooking. And it was actually harder than I say I am a lesbian. Because I am a lesbian, but it was easier to say to my friend that I am a lesbian than I say I cook. Because most of my friends, they are very elite. Lesbian is very like a progressive choice. But being cook in my community is like, what is it? But recently, I am working on this concept, and I am also advocating for that with my feminist community, and they are enjoying it. Yeah.
I think that that's a really powerful and interesting thought about the kitchen being the safest space. But I think the caveat of that is it's the home kitchen that is, because I think so many restaurant kitchens, unless you are a woman who owns your own restaurant, are actually the opposite or have been the opposite of a safe space. And I just think that to give more credit again to home cooking and the home, it really is a place of empowerment for women.
Or can be.
In a situation where the so-called professional version of that is the antithesis of, but sort of following up on that, I wanted again to ask you both how you see what you do, whether it's as the founder of League of Kitchens or as one of the instructors teaching people to cook. How do you see it as a form of activism?
Yeah, well, but I think there's sort of two things. One, at the center of what we do is really celebrating and recognizing immigrant women and the contributions that immigrants make to our culture and society. And, especially, unfortunately, in this current political moment, that feels so political and radical. Where there's so much, obviously, all of us who are here, I'm sure all feel this way, but, there's so much dehumanizing language, and what we're doing is both kind of the messaging we put out in the world, but then also the experiences that we offer are really about putting immigrants and immigrant women who often are at the bottom of the social totem pole in American culture into these places of privilege and recognition and celebration. And, another thing is that people oftentimes when they arrive at a class, they might feel nervous, they might feel awkward, they're going to a stranger's home, and always at the end, Mab can talk more about this, everyone's hugging, everyone feels like the instructor is their new favorite aunt, and it's so powerful because it also personalizes some other part of the world and some other culture that previously probably felt somewhat abstract or foreign. And I think this is especially important with cultures and countries that the U.S. is in conflict with, like Iran. But, you know, we also have instructors from Iraq and Afghanistan. And, you know, the two most recent terrorist attacks in New York were committed by people of Bangladeshi and Uzbek descent. And we have a Bangladeshi instructor and an Uzbek instructor. And I think particularly for those instructors, when students come to their homes, it's so important that they have a personal experience with someone from that culture. And then afterwards, so often I hear from students saying like, oh, this place that felt sort of foreign abstract now feels so personal. So when I read about that place in the newspaper, I think, oh, Kabul. Oh, that person could be Nuita's cousin or sister or brother or best friend, or, you know, and it's that is so powerful, you know, in terms of bridging difference and suspicion and hostility. And that's why I think what we're doing and what our instructors, you know, our instructors are really, they are true ambassadors in like the truest, fullest, realist sense. I mean, I think many political ambassadors, you know, are not the most ambassadorial in a deep sense, but in terms of really, you know, bridging difference. And yeah, so I'd say those are all the different ways I feel like we're very activist.
Yeah, that's kind of activism actually is very new for me, because for a long time, still I am wondering about phenomena of Lisa. She is. Because this is a very new generation. Look here, most of you are young and you are interested on food, and you are more also being independent and being creative in business, also one of the things that you are very powerful on that. In my generation, maybe things was more different. 9-to-5 job was very common. Now it's different. So for me, it took time to understand what is happening in League of Kitchen. What is happening when 6 people, they just walk inside of my home. In the beginning, I said, okay, this is like a Airbnb. Like, it's okay if strange people come to you, because there is some mechanism is working behind of that, and people like it's okay. It's okay meeting new people in home. But it was more than that. It was not just people by random. For me, it was they are people that they like food, but most important than that, they are curious about culture, and not just like a shiny culture. It's more about the understanding deep issues. They don't want cliche, they don't want a stereotype. They tired from things that they hear from media all the time. And they really want to understand what's going on in different countries. What is the culture of different countries, and what is the food in different countries? And when I start talking with them, most of them, they are young, and they say that their mom didn't like cooking. That's why they like to cook. And it's very interesting that most of our students, they are younger than, like they are 30, 32, 35. And for me, it was, why they interested on paying this money, spending weekend, come here, to the Sunset Park, 6 hours cooking.
4.5.
5.
Well, maybe your workshops go a little long.
No, 5. For me, yeah, 5 hours and a half. Cooking, that is, I don't know. It was all of my question in the beginning when I started working with Lisa. I said, I don't know this, but I just love new stuff. And then when I started, I find that they are not stranger people. This is community. This is community that we have, and just they connect with this website, and they just find each other. And also, it's about the connection and about the dialogue. Even I am thinking that I can solve all of conflict between Iran and Israel with League of Kitchen. And all of other countries that they have conflict with Iran, because many people who come to my workshop, they have a question and they feel me real. You know, I am real. I am real Iranian. I'm not like I am educated. Iran is educated. It has very high educated people. And I have culture, I have history, and all of these things happen just in simple League of Kitchens workshop. It is lots of things. That's why I'm thinking that Lisa made big job, and this is new generation of feminism in this country. It's that's why I'm really proud of you.
Thank
And you for work. Actually, I thought that you are like in my generation, and I'm thinking
Before the event.
Yeah, before. And I'm just thinking, why new generation, they are so interested on food and they so respect on home cook. That is really new phenomenon.
Well, I have a thought about that, and I think it has to do with loss. I think it's the loss of cooking and culinary knowledge and culture in our society. That's part of it.
I think it's part of it. I just, as we said before, I'm of the Generation X, which I like to say because we get forgotten a lot. And because it's a little bit different than the millennial point of view, but it's also not the boomer. We're sort of like the middle child generation. And I grew up with, my mom cooked all the time. But she wasn't cooking food that was culturally personal to her. She was just cooking very sort of like bougie, like pulling things out of the New York Times, you know. And she also, because I grew up with a certain amount of privilege, she didn't cook because she had to. She cooked because she wanted to, which is also, I think, such an important distinction. And what I got from my mom, aside from just that I was always very curious about food and I liked making things, but for my mom, it was actually, this is going to sound weird, sort of an act of independence. It was the one time when she was in the kitchen where if she wanted to, she could close the door. The kitchen was rarely closed, but sometimes she would just go in there and she would blare her music really loudly and she would cook. And it was the one time she didn't have to deal with me and my brother, and she didn't have to deal with my dad, who's lovely but needs a lot of attention. And I think for her, that was her space, which I think is really interesting because it's sort of neither for me of these two things. It's not loss.
Yeah.
And it's not, you know, it's not even necessarily a connection in the sense of a legacy of food. It's just this thing that my mom loved, and the more I started to understand why she loved it, the more I started to like it myself. So,
well, I think that's why I like to cook.
Yeah.
Like, I also find it relaxing and creative and, you know, something enjoyable for myself.
I also think something that I hope gets translated, it's something that Nigella Lawson always says, which is that it's so important that we are able to feed ourselves. And, you know, you can define that in any way, but cooking is a huge part of that. And I think there's something incredibly empowering in knowing that I can always make myself. I really like cooking for myself. I do it all the time. And first of all, I think it's more sustainable. But I do think it's just the knowledge that you can always feed yourself. You know, in some ways that's a luxury. But I think the cooking part of it is less about luxury and more just about the very basic things that we need as humans to do for ourselves and for each other, which, you know, I had another question that is much more practical, logistical, that I'm curious about, which is, and Mom, I think you're probably going to be able to answer this, but you may have also, I think you may have thoughts on it. How easy has it been for you to cook the food with the ingredients you need? Like, have you had to do any kind of sort of compromising or swapping of ingredients? And has that changed your food? Has cooking in America changed your food in any way?
Oh, that is a very interesting question. We cook through of our memories. every day that we cook is different than the other day. That is, and every cook is unique. This is one thing, and I think memory can also manipulate about ingredients. When I am thinking about certain food from my childhood, I manipulate by my current history, and my current situation. That's why fusion food happen with no conscious. Sometimes we are unconscious about that. That is challenge that I have now. That's why when League of Kitchen and Lisa, because we should cook in League of Kitchen very traditional. It's not like a fusion. It should be exactly the same food that I had eaten in my childhood or from my mom's kitchen. So that was a little bit challenging for me because many Persian ingredients is not available in New York. Oh, really? Okay. I have to do that. Yeah, I heard a lot about your shop. Yeah. So, and that is challenging. That's why we choose some food that it's really independent from market. Like a rice, for me, I can't find Persian rice from north, but I think that I adopted with basmati, long basmati. And some other way is mixing between jasmine rice and between long basmati to create same smell or add some butter on that. So this is about that. This is very important that we have the same food memory from the past, and we try to find ingredients to make exactly that food. And that's take lots of time for us to find nice vegetable shop, to find nice, some alternative for that. But sometimes I think that my food is more delicious than my mom. Because I think a lot how I find my ingredients. But as I said, one of the challenges when we are, as an immigrant, when we start our cooking in other country, sometimes the culture of that country, like here has a lots of here New York is different than Iran, so smell of vegetable are different. So this is things that we try to adopt with the new country, but the valuable things in League of Kitchen is we also very committed to the same food, same ingredients, same taste. And that is things that we work a lot in training to find what kind of ingredients is good. It's not like one night we create this workshop. It took for me 6 months to find out, to make a food, the same food that my mom used to cook for workshop. That's it. But good question. Very smart question.
Yeah, and I think for different instructors, that answer is different because, like, for our South Asian instructors, there's very robust network of markets, like Patel Brothers in Jackson Heights has everything our Indian instructor ever wants or needs. But actually, I just had a thought I wanted to go back to something you said about your mom and kind of a different cultural approach to cooking, which is, I want to talk about my other grandmother for a minute, my Jewish grandmother, because my Jewish grandmother is a very different story from my Korean grandmother. She grew up in Forest Hills. She was the first woman in her family to go to college. She went to NYU. She worked her way through college as a radio producer at NBC. She was super fashionable, super into style, wanted to create this glamorous intellectual identity for herself, totally distancing herself from her immigrant mother, Hungarian Jewish, making heavy food. She cared a lot about appearance. She was very cultured. She later became a TV producer for public television. She was very feminist for her generation. And interestingly, she kind of rejected cooking, but then in the 70s, got into Gourmet magazine, and growing up, I would look at in her kitchen. I would look at Marcella Hazan's cookbook and Craig Claiborne's cookbook and James Beard's cook. She was very into kind of like American gourmet food culture. And my grandparents, they lived in Great Neck. They would come into the city like 4 nights a week and loved going to restaurants and taking me to restaurants. And they took me on trips overseas. And so I really think with them and from them, I was introduced to a different aspect of food culture, and they really valued eating at restaurants from all over the world. And so I think the League of Kitchens really does come out of an influence from both sides, from both my grandmothers in many ways, because also, I'm not just staying at home cooking. I started a company. I'm also an entrepreneur, So in many ways, the League of Kitchens, the idea and the reality is like an homage to both my grandmothers and to their influence. And also, I think, to being bicultural and biracial and that experience in that, and the child of one immigrant and the child of one American, that I have created a company that brings together women from all around the world. And that a huge part of my role is moving in and out of cultures and moving in and out of the world of our students and the world of our instructors. And it's like moving into the world of my immigrant mother and moving into the world of my American father and translating and, doing all of that. So I think those are some good things to surface. It's not just my Korean grandmother and the loss of her culture, which is also painful and real too.
I think it's that there's so much nostalgia, because growing up here, my parents also were restaurant obsessed, and so they just took us. And so that was such a huge part of I don't think it's why I'm a food writer, but I do think it's why when I did start writing about food, it just felt so natural to me. So I do think it's this thing that we don't necessarily, it's not the same as someone teaching us how to cook a specific type of cuisine, but it definitely becomes part of our memory, right? And something that we pass along. But it also makes me think of, again, something's happened in the last 2 decades, and in some ways it's had some negative effects, but in some ways, like League of Kitchens, it's done really great things, which is that food has become a pop cultural genre in a way that
the
it
new
wasn't
rock
before.
and roll.
Exactly. Food is now entertainment. And I think that navigating that is really challenging, because if you do it right, you can use that for good. And if you are instead just using it to pander, it can end up in a completely different direction. Sort of related to that, and related to the idea of things, adopting things. And one of the things that gets talked about so much, at least in food media right now, is this idea of appropriation. I think a lot of what you guys are doing is actually an act of preservation, a sort of defiant act against that. But I wonder if you guys think about that and what your thoughts are on seeing it tends to be white male chefs, deciding that now I'm going to cook Thai food, and then getting seen as experts because they opened restaurants, and I wonder, I don't know. I just wonder your thoughts on that. And for me, I think that it's a sort of a slope. I think there are different degrees. I don't know if you have.
Well, I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like League of Kitchens is partly a counter to the adulation of the white male celebrity chef. Because it's like, no, let's make Mab and Yamini and Jeanette and Maha the celebrities they deserve to be, in the sense of being recognized and celebrated for their knowledge and expertise. Like, this is the source of this knowledge. So let's, also I kind of feel like there are a lot of chefs who are, who talk about their moms, particularly children of immigrants who are chefs, which is awesome. And they're doing something different. If you're a great restaurant chef, I have a lot of respect for that too. But I'm always like, well, if you learned everything from your mom, can't she get paid and get some focus and some articles and some attention? And, so the League of Kitchens in some ways is a way of trying to do that.
Yeah, I think it's like owning something that it was It used to be for us, but they occupied it. It's as a feminist, from feminist perspective. You know, it's, and I think that in digital era, we could, it's changed. Digital era is changing, meaning everything. If we didn't have internet, or if this platform, the website of League of Kitchen couldn't work, like the same thing couldn't work 10 or 20 years ago, I think.
I agree.
That is, yeah, that's very important. So I think it's about the democratizing everything and also democratizing of the cook and taking, I don't want to make it like a gap, like a, I don't want to say make an enemy and say they are enemy. No, they are. They went to a school, they worked very hard. It's not easy to work in restaurant as a chef. There is lots of hierarchy for that. But, and I think that home cook is much organic and much authentic. But I think also in digital era, we had this chance to own our own space. And I think that cooking is part of everyday life of us. We struggle with, like now we conscious about our health more than before. So how we can, you talked about feeding ourselves, how we can have healthy food. Many people, they like to cook at home because they care about their own health. And then after a while, you say, okay, I tired from this vegetarian food. I want to find another vegetarian food. And then slowly, by being health conscious, we move to more better food and better food because we want to feed ourselves. The other things, we can't afford every day we go to fancy restaurant to enjoy. And we want to enjoy. And this is the human being in 21st century. The level of enjoyment in this era is more than before. Think about sex, think about entertainment, think about other fashion. Everything is growing. And how we can make our own fashion and makeup and everything, but we can't make beautiful, delicious food for ourselves, and for our friends. So I think it's so related. I think Mab Abbasgholizadeh, as an Iranian feminist, is during of the, now it's in during of kind of transition to the new wave of feminism. I think cooking at home, it's not going back. It's not taking power from white man chef with the accent. It's just going forward because this is our own space, because we need it, because we like to feed ourselves, we want to be healthy, we want to understand culture, we want to be closer to ingredients, we hate junky food. We are different. We are different than last time, like 20, maybe 30 years ago. This is more about the time. And yeah, so, and I think that kind of, that type of chef, we need them as a mainstream chef. And when we're tired from home, sometime we go restaurant and we eat and we say, because I do that, I go to some Persian fancy restaurant, I say, this is supposed to be this food in my country, but it's not. But it's so fancy. It's so delicious, but it's not the same food that I had from my mom or in my, like a local community. So that is different and mainstream.
I feel like maybe I'm supposed to be asking you guys in the audience if you have questions for us. First of all, thank you, both
Thank
of
you
so much for that.
Thank you for.
But yeah, please, if you have questions, I think they're going to maybe pass a mic around or something. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi. Thank you all so much for a great presentation. I took a League of Kitchens class a couple of years ago with Demira. I'll never forget it. I want to ask all of you about a shift that I think we're starting to see in the food media and maybe broader food landscape in the United States at least, which is this sort of shift towards what I guess I'll call bubby chic, and I think League of Kitchens is really a big part of it. So we see books like Pasta Grannies, which is here. We see that excellent Staten Island restaurant with the nonnas of the world. And I'm also thinking about the publication of Sippy Pinellas's book, Leave Me Alone with the Recipes, a couple years ago. And at the same time, we're seeing the timely downfall of dudes like Mario Batali. And it's this simultaneous recognition of just what you've been describing, who's really been feeding us all these generations. And so I'm wondering how League of Kitchens positions itself with these other people moving in the same direction. Are these, I sort of doubt they're your competitors, and I feel more that they're probably your comrades, but I wonder if maybe each of you could comment on the new rise of sort of these unglamorous cooking celebrities.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of thoughts about that. And actually, there's this trend forecasting newsletter called the Cassandra Report that actually did a newsletter about that we were included in. So you're spot on. I mean, I think it's some fatigue with the Mario Batalis and a desire for something that feels more real. I think it may also reflect a disconnection many young people feel with the older generation, and that there's a desire and craving for that kind of intergenerational connection. I think that's something we see in our classes, that it's, again, just as it's unusual to have a meaningful interaction with someone from a different culture in New York City. You know, if you're in your 20s or 30s in New York City, it's very possible and probable that you're only around other people in their 20s and 30s, like at your work, when you socialize, and that so often people in their 20s or 30s will go to our classes and be like, I need this energy, like I want to be with like a mom or grandma, or like this kind of, have this intergenerational connection and to kind of feel that wisdom and that energy. So I'm very pro, granny chic. I feel like we should make T-shirts that say "Cook like a grandma." Maybe that's what we should do for next year. But and it's funny too, because not all of our instructors are grandmas. Actually, two of our instructors, Noita and Angie, are in their late 30s. But I always say they cook like a grandma, because Noita, our Afghan instructor, she cooked 3 meals a day for a household of 35 people for 10 years. So she cooks like she's 75, and she has that confidence and that muscle memory. And similarly with Angie too. And I think it's just, I hope that it's a recognizing of the value also of that kind of bodily, sensory knowledge, and that kind of oral tradition, and that is very much grandma cooking culture. You want to say anything about that?
I'm a little skeptical. This is just a general thing with me. I worry about any group of people being a trend. I don't like to.
Grandmas are not a trend.
Yeah,
and
so I think I feel like I want to see older women get the attention that they deserve for just their time here on Earth and everything they've contributed. But I don't necessarily want to see it in, which we discussed before, a fetishized way. And I don't want to see it, in a way that sort of veers on caricature or supposes that there's only one way to be a grandmother. Also, one of the problematic things that's happened with conversations around food and gender is there's a tendency towards essentialism, to say men cook a certain way and women cook a certain way. Like, you'll even see it sometimes very subtly in the language used in restaurant reviews. Things will be called lusty and earthy and rustic, or made lovingly or nurturing, and that will be describing the food of a woman. And then with a man, it will be, risky, gutsy, bold, smart, clever, like just things like that. So worry just because I don't want this idea of grandma cooking to be in any way limiting. On the other hand, I do love seeing women get recognition for doing the same amount of work, even if it looks different on the plate or tastes different, than, you know, people who have been working in professional kitchens. So I
also think it's an and. I feel like, I mean, that's the whole thing about feminism is let's not denigrate the femme. Let's not denigrate things that are historically associated with women. But let's also make sure women can be engineers and doctors and mathematicians and scientists and cook in a gutsy, risky, intellectual way and, you know, be totally whoever they want to be.
And it's an ownership thing, right? The amazing thing about League of Kitchens is that you guys are in charge of this. You're getting paid for this. It's not someone else deciding it and someone else making money off of that. And I think that's a
very important.
Huge part of it, right?
And so much of what we do is creating opportunity for our instructors to tell their own story, how they want to do. Like, actually, one very important thing about our classes is I'm not at any of the classes. There's no staff at any of the classes. It's only the instructor and their students. So it's their show. This is all about how they want to teach, cook, present themselves, tell their story. And it's the same when we do press, we do events, all of that. And that's so crucial.
And that's for me, that's the big difference, which is why I'm happy that you're in the Cassandra letter, but then I also hope the distinction is made. You know?
Totally.
There was this great article written a few weeks ago in Eater about how all these men are suddenly naming their restaurants after their grandmothers. And it's great. It's written with just the amount of cynicism that you need for an article like that. But that's the part of it that I'm like, wait a second, you know, like,
let's pay those grandmothers.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the main difference is about the energy of the food. You know, grandma's food has more energy. I feel it because the feeling is feeding. I'm not grandma, I am mom, but when I want to cook for my daughter, I cook better than cooking for myself because I really want to feed her the best things, and I wanna feed her and give her all of my love. That is the things we have in grandma food. And we don't have it in any luxury restaurant, that food.
Unless a great point to prove your point, right? I'm thinking the difference is that it's personal and not personal like I'm telling you my story, which chefs will often say that their food is personal because it's about their journey. And it's personal in that you know the person you're cooking for. You are cooking specifically for a person or a group of people. And the difference is if you go to a restaurant, and not as a critic, I mean, and you're a friend of the chef and the chef knows you're coming, you will get a different meal and you will get a better meal because they're so excited and happy you're there because they know you. And I'm not going to say that it's grandma, but it's sort of that grandma effect, right? It's
putting
personal.
the love into it.
Yeah.
It's putting the intention and the care.
Because it's not anonymous. You know who's receiving it.
And in all of one of the main word in League of Kitchen is we cook with love. And always I'm thinking why you say that always, but this is true that when I see people and this is the connection we make it during our workshop, and with that connection, sometimes our food is very delicious, sometimes is delicious, sometimes amazing. So it's very related to the energy and dynamic and love.
Can you raise your hand again? Thank you.
A very short and to the point question. How many teachers, you call them teachers?
Instructors, yeah.
How many instructors does League of Kitchen have? And what countries or culinary traditions do they come from?
So right now we have 12 instructors, and they are from Lebanon, Bangladesh, Iran, Uzbekistan, Japan, Iraq, Greece, Argentina, India, Nepal, Mexico, I'm missing someone. We don't have Trinidad anymore. I did say Japan. I said Bangladesh and India and Nepal. Did I just miscount on my fingers? I think I said Argentina.
Anywhere else in South America?
Just Mexico. Did I say Mexico? Afghanistan. Yes, that's the missing one. And I just hired an Indonesian woman who we're going to start training.
Okay, next time you
Yeah.
next time you start from Japan and then move
Yeah, I was trying to go through New York City. I was thinking about who lives in Brooklyn, who lives in Manhattan, who lives in Queens, and I was picturing like moving out from Astoria through Kew Gardens and Forest Hills into Flushing and yes, etc.
I just wanted to speak on the side of being a line cook in New York City. And, you know, we were briefly talking about kitchens and how restaurant kitchens are so totally entirely different. And, you know, not doing this for very long. And I have had the, opportunity to work for a chef who is an immigrant. The restaurant I work in is dedicated to his grandmother. He offers language classes in Spanish and in English so everyone can communicate and be part of the same community. But there's still this pull to not be in this sort of environment where there's no connection to the person you're feeding, where there's not a way to take care of someone and provide for someone you know, like you were just mentioning. And it's really exciting to see things like this happening, which I'm also attracted to, you know, where the home cook is being heralded as the place to be. And I was really struck by calling the kitchen the safe place to be empowered. And that just really resonated with me. And I really hope that that's soon to be the trend for cooking in the future. So,
Thank you.
Folks, do you mind passing this down?
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciated the talk. I wanted to start with that. And I have sort of a dilemma in my day-to-day life because I am also a cook by trade. And I struggle between the digital side of things and the personal side of things. And I was thinking about this beautiful idea that Margaret Yersinar wrote about that's called the granaries of memory, and how, as you said, cooking is an oral tradition and it's been passed down for so long, but we have this resource which is the internet, which has both evil and good mixed up in it. And I wonder if you've ever thought about documenting what the women bring and the problematic nature behind that, and how do you reconcile it, and is it even necessary if you're providing this personal experience?
So 2 things about that. It's a great question. One, as part of our training with all of our instructors, we actually work with a professional recipe writer and developer to capture their informal recipes and to write them into professionally written, tested recipes that we can give our students. And that's actually, I think, important from a pedagogical perspective so that students have the experience of cooking with Mab and seeing her, and I think just cooking with any of our instructors and seeing someone who's really an expert home cook who does everything by feel and memory, but then they don't have to be like, wait, what are you doing? How much is that? I'm never gonna be able to make this at home. So they can go home and cook from a recipe and also remember what they did with the instructor. And actually, we're about to start working on a cookbook. Yeah, thank you. So hopefully in a year or 2, you guys can get our cookbook. And so I'm not against documenting the recipes of our instructors. I actually think it's a wonderful, important thing. But I think having the classes where you can actually go cook with them is also really special because, as we all know, it's often very difficult to capture in a written recipe certain kinds of sensory cues or experiences. Like, for instance, particularly around dough, I feel like all of our instructors who teach things having to do with dough, it's so crucial. It's like, oh, it should feel like this at this moment, then feel like this at this moment. And, it's so bodily. And, yeah.
That's true. The other things I remember when I was cooking and recipe writer was
Liz, yeah.
Liz, it was the question she asked, in documenting, many times we don't know what we are doing. We just doing, And then she was asking me about why you use this oil and not that oil, and then why you use this rice and not that rice. It wasn't just about my using my memory. It was about my also connection with my family, that why I'm using this oil. Oh, this because my dad said this, or I am using this rice because my mom said that. So it's like you remember many a story behind of that. I think documenting is good when sometime interviewing us, sometime someone expert in recipe writing area. So because many of cook people, they don't remember why they use that way for cooking. And it's very important that we have sometime someone follow us and ask question. And it's also happened during workshop that student, they ask question, and they ask a very, very small, tiny question about some trick that we don't have in our recipes. And it reminds us beautiful story about this. So documentation, I like it when it's combined with a story and with a very good expert person to know about the recipes and about the storytelling.
And actually, another great example of how that process can actually reveal new things is I remember when we were writing down our Greek instructor's recipe for her spanakopita, she always cuts it before she puts it in the oven. And I asked her, I was like, oh, why do you do that? And she's like, She took a moment. She's like, oh, because if you cut it afterwards, it always cracks. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, that's so smart. And that's one of those things that's not difficult, right? But you have to know to do that. And those are the things that our instructors are full of. But actually, when we go through the training process, part of that process is helping them realize what they already know. Yes. And that kind of documentation process is part of that.
I think the one thing that's hard with American cookbooks is that publishers tend to be really standardized in their language of recipes, and that's one of the things that I think that you miss, which is when you're in someone's kitchen, they will often just say, like, it could be a metaphor, a comparison of, how your onion should dance in a pan, or how something should feel like marzipan, or, something really specific, or even just a turn of phrase, and you'll see that edited out in cookbooks because there's a certain format for how a recipe should be made, and and everything should be in recipe writing right now, and publishing tends to be all about precision. And the truth is that there's no such thing really as precision, because every time you cook, it's going to be a little different. The temperature is going to be different in the room. Your oven doesn't always behave. Your stove acts differently. Your onions are less sweet than they were last week. And so I think that's something that's really hard to capture on a page sometimes, but when you're actually watching someone do it, you start to almost like pick up on their intuition. I guess it's hard to put intuition on a page, Yeah,
the other thing is the difference between training and between just following recipe is the using different memory, like and different senses. So we remember more when we follow instructor,
Just one thing I wanted to tell you, probably don't know, and I'm from Russia, so from the Soviet Union, and in early years of Soviet Union, in 20s, it was attack for kitchen slavery for women. They wanted sincerely, and they thought that it would be very good for the nation to free women from kitchen slavery. And they created for that, probably terrible, I wasn't experienced, it was before my time, factory kitchens where people could come. It was huge halls where food was served. I don't know what kind of food, but they tried to make it attractive, of course. But it was, when I was reading about that and just learned about that, it just hurts me. And I thought, I have privilege to cook if I want to. But here, I think it's a good thing that people have choice. They can go to the restaurants of their choice and have whatever they want there. And if they want, they enjoy, they really enjoy here, like never in Russia, cooking for friends, for family, for relatives. And this is a great thing, and I'm happy I live here now.
And I think that's a very, very important point, that it's about the choice, because my Korean grandmother had no choice. She had to cook 3 meals a day for her family of 6 children, and you know, she wanted to study the piano, but that, you know, that didn't end up being an option for her. So
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful talk. And in terms of standardizing recipes, I come from a background where I couldn't even boil water when I got married. But fortunately, my mother-in-law was a terrific cook. She came from Italy, and she taught me. I married the only child, her son. My son, he likes his pasta like this and his meatballs like that. Fine, which was annoying, yet I learned to make this pretty good meatball, right? Okay. So fast forward, had kids. I had to cook, not by choice, but by need. Couldn't afford restaurants. Back in the 50s, you didn't go to a restaurant. You ate at home. So I had to learn to make certain dishes. And I remember when rice-a-roni came out on the market. I said, oh my God, this is so fancy, this rice-a-roni thing. You know, just put the water and you do it. You know, you don't have to fuss too much with, you know, is the rice going to come out, you know, fluffy or not, whatever. I made that rice-a-roni. My husband came home and said, 2 starches? What is this? Rice and pasta in the same? I said, listen, this is supposed to be a terrific dish from, I think it was from Iran or something like that. I had no idea. Anyway, rice-a-roni went out of my kitchen fast. Speed up to my kids grew up, they got married, I have grandkids. And I'm kind of a decent cook only because Fanny Farmer was my savior. I went through that book very selectively, and I learned a few recipes that I was able to manage pretty well. My grandkids come around, and so I'm trying to cook from memory, because it's really from memory, from Colombia, and I'm saying, arepas, I know, they were delicious, and I'm giving it all my all, trying to figure out how to do it, and I'm pretty good at this. My grandkids love them. What's the recipe? I don't know, honey. You just take the flour and take a little water and take a little salt and you mash your dough and, you know, all this. No, you have to write it down because they are the new world. They don't fuss around, you know. I want 1 teaspoon of salt and 3 of pepper and whatever, right? So I was forced to standardize my recipes. And along comes my daughter, who is a very good cook. She's a chef. She has a restaurant when she was all of 18 years old. Very, very young. And the restaurant was very well received. Had a terrific review in the New York Post. Her name is Claudia Sidoti, if you know her. But anyway, and she's heading a bunch of kitchens now. I don't want to say the name because I'm not selling her product. But anyway, but from her I learned to also be more careful when I cook, to realize that it's just don't grab the salt and throw it in there. Try to measure it so that the recipe would come out pretty much the same. So that's all I wanted to say, you know.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, I wanted to say thank you as well for your talk. I'm from the South, and y'all have a lot better restaurants up here than we do. And I think the vast majority of the country, in fact, is surviving on processed food. I worry about that a lot. and perhaps the people who come to your workshops, which sound fabulous, are already interested in cooking and taking that time and the love. I love that we talked about that love. To me, that's what home cooking is. Your very first question is it's the love and the comfort that someone puts into that food and the time. And to me, cooking for yourself actually takes a lot of self-love. And I just wonder, is that something you can teach? And what your thoughts would be on that?
And I think we're out of time, but I'll just say this last thing, which is my mom, who is not a very good cook, is always like, Lisa, you started this cooking school. How do I become a better cook? What do I do? And basically I say, well, it starts with caring and liking it. And what does cooking with love mean? I've thought about this a lot. I think it means cooking with intention and attention and care, and because you're interested, you pay attention and you learn and you try things again. And so it's that, and then that's what is the love, I think, is how it translates into good food. It's not, and maybe there's some mystical energy part too, but that it's the care.
I would say in life, usually if you like doing something,
Exactly.
you tend to be good at it,
Right.
or you at least tend to be conscientious about it. And I think with cooking, and I mean, obviously this requires a little bit of patience, right? There's so many different aspects of cooking, and my theory is that there's probably an aspect that everyone would relate to, like the same way some people really like to bake, or some people really love doing prep, like they love chopping. Other people hate it. So I kind of think it's that thing of like finding what it is, finding your way in, maybe, and then once you found your way in. But I do think someone who doesn't like to cook, it's always going to be a barrier, and you can't blame them.
I go a little bit practical. That is, I'm supporting this, all of these things, but practical. First, think what you like today to eat. This is about the body. It's about the listening to body and what we need to eat. Like if you don't eat meat, you can't make it with love. This is the first thing. The second thing is when you take ingredients, go buy it, just choose it, and make a connection with them, and touch them, and like a connection like with your energy of your fingers. So put all of your fingers' energy on all of your ingredients and talk with them and think about how they came to you, like a rice, from where, what was their journey. So make like a connection with all of your ingredients, and then put the beautiful music that you like and start making it, or anything that make you relax. But think about just be in the moment and just do it and follow your intuition in that. Like if in recipe says that add this this spices, and you say no, I feel I like that spice, do that. Follow your intuition. So this is about the connection with food. And after a while, when you do that, you feel more love, especially when you have this process. People, the most important thing, don't make mistake during cooking. Don't start cooking when you are very hungry. That is very important. And don't think that you want to finish it and have it. And don't think about the result. Think about the process. So all of this help you to love cooking like me. Because I used all of these things to make every day more connection with my work, with my cooking. I'm working on that. I felt that I have this talent to cook, but making connection and feeling and love is need time. It's like a real relationship. So we should take care about that and spend time with that. Yes.
I'm all about playlists, by the way. Like I like to conduct baking experiments where I'll just decide that I'm really curious to see what happens if I put these two things together. So I'm going to make a cake out of it, and I'll make a playlist specifically for making this cake. And so then I get really excited to go listen to my playlist, and like it just helps me get in this space, like a mood. It's just things to look forward to. And I would say the other side of that, definitely enjoying the process, but also it never has to be perfect. It just has to taste good. And like my general theory is if you put a bunch of things that you like together in a pot, it is probably going to taste good. It may not be like the perfect texture. It may collapse on itself. But if it tastes good, who cares? So I think that too, like, letting yourself off the hook, this idea that you have to make this thing and it has to be exactly right, like that's not the point. The point is that you had a nice time doing it, and and then you're happy to eat it.
Okay, we're getting the signal. Yeah. We've come to the end.
That's it. Everyone go cook.
And
sign up for classes also.
I just want to say, too, that somewhere there are flyers that have a promo code on the bottom. Okay, right there, like next to the checkout counter. So you could get a discount on our classes if you're interested. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. Do you have a packet or a press release?